This fence is great for machining grooves and rebates, or rabbets if you prefer. The featherboards have cuts which go in two directions at once, so the workpiece is held down onto the table and in towards the fence at the same time. I don't get to use it very often, but when I do, it's the bee's knees. In the past, I've always cut my V-grooves on the router table. But while that works very well, I always get a little flat at the bottom of the groove, which has to be dealt with, either by scraping out to a sharp corner, or by removing the arises from the keys themselves. This HPL material is very hard indeed, and ordinary hand tools don't touch it. So I'm machining these by canting my dado set to 45 degrees.
Oh, excellent.
The result is a beautifully clean, sharp corner. The diamond keys are cut from the same material, and whilst I can't plane them, I can abrade them. They must not be smaller than the grooves, or the two layers will be able to move sideways, which we do not want. They need to be exactly the same size, or just a hair bigger. But because there are two grooves, they are stable, even if they are a tad oversized. We need no slop and no rock.
Slides really nicely that way. Doesn't rock at all. And no sideways movement. That is perfect. The top carriage is an assembly of three pieces. We've got the top layer of the stack. We've got the vertical working face, which carries the workpiece, and this bracket, which keeps the two nice and square. All the joinery is done over on the router table, but there's also some drilling and tapping to do, and that was problematic.
These nylon bolts allow the jig to slide sweetly over the cast iron table, and they also allow me to set the jig square to the table. As you will see later, I had to redo these holes because I hadn't got enough adjustment to square it up.
Go on. It's because I've just snipped it a bit short and I've probably got a bit of a burr on it.
If you are building this jig out of MDF, don't forget to insert a couple of dowels through the MDF so that you can tap into them rather than just MDF. For a bolt like this, which is going to be set just once, you can tap a hardwood dowel, such as cherry or maple, very successfully. Set it and forget it.
And now I can use that and the same one at the other end over here to square it up on the table. There are two slots to route in this jig. There's a small one on the underside, which is part of the fine adjustment mechanism, and there's this big one at the top, which accommodates the travel from one side of the tenon to the other. I've actually got this slot a little bit too long, and I'd got the Bristol lever right up at this end, and then only afterwards did I realise that it fouled the guard. But on the plans, the dimensions will be accurate. The slots are made by a process called dropping on, and that takes place over on the router table. This is my setup for dropping on. I've got a 1/4 inch cutter. It's only sticking up 1 millimetre or 2 millimetres at the most. Particularly with a very short slot like this, there's nowhere for the dust to go. If it's a longer slot, I've got an exhaust port there, but we're not going to push that far. So you have to take very shallow cuts. The deeper you go, you clear it out each time, the deeper you go, there will then become a little bit of space for the dust to go to. But the first cut in particular, there's nowhere for it to go, so it just gets compressed back where it came from. So I've got a support stop at the back to push against as I drop it on, and then I've got an end stop, and between the two, I should have, between there and there, there's the 6 1/4 millimetres of the cutter, plus about 26, So about 32 millimeters, that's about 35. So we'll see where that takes us actually. It might be that we have to adjust one or the other of these. So lots of shallow cuts. Let's give it a whirl. Right, well that looks about right. Let's just measure it. I've marked it from 25 to 60, and that's going to be from 25 to about 58. So we could afford 58. So we could afford to take that back just a couple of millimeters. It's not critical. Right. Raise it a little bit. Little bit of a nick there, but that's all right. That's nice, that. Happy with that. Now I've got to fix the face to the top carriage, and I'm going to route a groove along here and then make a tongue on this to fit that groove so that it goes in there like that, and then fit a bracket so that it stays square, and that's the original one, and I'm going to make the equivalent out of a little piece of HPL. So this is my setup for routing the groove. I'm referencing off the top edge because the bottom edge has got these little studs in, and if I try to do that, then they're going to get stuck when it goes over the entrance here. Yes, I can close that up further, but this is a continuous edge. It's sticking up only about 3 millimeters. And I've got a dust extraction port here. This one is useless for this because it's just too far from the action, and also this closes off the air gap here. So there's a port here, and there's a tube that goes down there, down the rabbit hole, round the tree, and back down the rabbit hole down there, where it's connected to my dust extractor. So, well, that's about it really. Let's give it a whirl. Then it's a stopped groove for the bracket. It'd help if you connected the hose up, Steve. Idiot. So now I've got to convert this edge into a tongue to fit into this groove here. I've kept the cutter at exactly the same height as that, and I'm going to route the tongue with the workpiece vertical like that. And that way they should meet perfectly all the way along. And I've got this fence is fine adjustable, so I'm starting by just kissing the workpiece there, and I shall move the fence back until it's a nice fit in that groove. So let's give it a whirl. Is everything right? Is everything tight? Tight, tight, tight. Yes, good. So I unlock the fence, rotate that one turn and tighten the fence. And that's moved this fence back 1 millimeter. Oh, that's what I want. That is what I want. Look at that. It's just perfect for gluing. So now I've got to fit a bracket in there.
The cut edges of this HPL can be quite sharp, so I'm just chamfering any edges that I'm likely to make contact with.
So let's see if this fits. Oh, look at that. Now, is that good or is that good?
The front face has an array of holes which allows me to attach sacrificial supports or mounting blocks for toggle clamps, etc. Below the saw line, I make sure only to use brass screws. I once accidentally ran my jig into my blade and it found a steel screw. That was not a happy day. It cost me a new blade.
Now, if you're making your jig out of MDF, I recommend that you reinforce all the fixing holes with these little brass screw cups. It makes it so that when you put a screw in there, you're not constantly chewing up the MDF. They're readily available. They're very nice, but once they're in, they stay in because of these serrations. I've tried to dig this one out to show you, and I can't get it out. I'm going to have to destroy this to salvage the brass screw cups, but they're very good.
Before we can glue the top carriage together, there is another slot to route. The long slot allows the top carriage to travel from one side of the blade to the other. I've made this slot longer than the original, which turned out to be a mistake, as the Bristol lever fouls the front guard. Hey ho.
Very nice. Very nice. I'm gluing this together in 2 phases. I'm currently gluing this piece into here with this stuff. It's the first time I've used it, so I hope it's right. Ordinary super glue works, but that's designed specifically for plastic. And this is not glued in because you've got to get this, this and this all aligned. Trying to do that 3 at once with a glue where you've got virtually 0 open time strikes me as being too much of a challenge for my liking. So right, so we know that that's aligned now. So now all I've got to do, Now, if you're building this out of MDF, of course, it's a lot easier. You can glue it, and indeed you can screw it. But screwing into this stuff is virtually impossible. Well, I think that's probably it. We'll see. I'll leave it for a bit, and then we'll see how robust it is. Good.